She sat there frozen, mascara pooling beneath her eyes as his words sliced through the elegant restaurant. "You're just too fat for me." But what happened next, when the pale-eyed stranger rose from the table beside her, would change not just her evening but her entire destiny. This story will break your heart and then it will put it back together again. Before we continue, let us know in the comment section what time it is and where you are watching from. And remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of the story. The water glass trembled in Ashley's hand as she tried to process what she'd just heard. Across from her, Logan was already standing, pulling his jacket from the back of his chair like he couldn't leave fast enough. He dropped 2 $20 bills beside her untouched spaghetti. "That should cover your meal. Maybe save some money and hit a gym before your next date." The words landed like blows. Ashley's carefully chosen royal blue satin dress, the one she'd agonized over for an hour, changing 3 times before leaving her apartment, now felt like a costume she had no right to wear. She'd arrived at Marcello's 45 minutes ago, palms sweating with nervous hope. She'd checked her reflection in the car mirror twice, adjusted her blonde ponytail, and whispered affirmations she'd learned from a self-help podcast. "You are worthy. You are enough." I don't understand," Ashley managed to whisper, her voice cracking. "My photos were recent. I didn't lie about anything." Logan's laugh was bitter. "Recent. Maybe. Accurate." He gestured vaguely at her body with disgust. "That's debatable. Look, I'm sure you're a nice person, but I have a reputation to maintain. Walking into my firm's holiday party with this." He shook his head. "Not happening." Ashley's vision blurred as Logan continued his assessment, each word another nail in the coffin of her self-worth. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the upholstered chair and cease to exist. Her hand reached for her purse, fumbling for her keys, when a voice cut through the humiliation like a blade through silk. "That's enough." The words were quiet, barely above conversational volume, yet every head in their section of the restaurant turned. Logan froze mid-gesture, his hand still pointing dismissively at Ashley. The man who'd spoken rose from the adjacent table with a fluid grace that seemed almost otherworldly. He was tall, impossibly pale, with platinum hair that fell past his shoulders and eyes the color of winter fog. His black velvet jacket was embroidered with intricate silver thread that caught the candlelight, and when he moved, it was as though the air itself parted in deference. Paulus Caldus had been enjoying a rare Bordeaux when the cruelty at the next table began. He'd heard worse in his 8 centuries. Far worse, but something about this particular brand of casual viciousness ignited a fury he hadn't felt in decades. He stepped between Logan and Ashley's table, his presence filling the space like gathering storm clouds. "You will apologize," Paulus said softly, his accent carrying traces of languages long dead. "Or you will leave. Those are your only options." Logan's face flushed red. "Excuse me. This is a private conversation. Nothing conducted at that volume in a public establishment is private." Paulus's eyes narrowed, and something ancient and dangerous flickered in their depths. "You have humiliated this woman for the crime of not meeting your exceptionally poor standards. I suggest you reconsider your next words very carefully." The temperature around them seemed to drop. Logan opened his mouth, then closed it. Something in the stranger's steady gaze, something predatory and utterly cold, made his bravado crumble like ash. She. "Look, I didn't mean." Logan stammered, taking an involuntary step backward. "Leave." The single word carried the weight of centuries of absolute authority. It wasn't a suggestion. Logan grabbed his coat and fled, nearly colliding with a waitress in his haste to reach the exit. The door chimed as he disappeared into the night. The silence that followed was deafening. Ashley sat frozen, tears still wet on her cheeks, unable to process what had just happened. Paulus turned to her, and his expression softened entirely. The dangerous edge vanished, replaced by something almost gentle. "Forgive the intrusion," he said, his voice now warm as aged whiskey. But I couldn't, in good conscience, allow that to continue. He gestured toward his table, where a half-finished glass of wine sat beside an untouched dessert. Would you do me the honor of joining me? It seems neither of us will enjoy our evening alone now, and I confess I would appreciate the company. Ashley stared at him, this impossible stranger who'd appeared like something from a Gothic fairy tale. Her voice was barely a whisper when she finally answered. Yes. Ashley's legs felt unsteady as she moved to Paulus's table, acutely aware of every eye in the restaurant tracking her movement. But when she settled into the velvet chair he pulled out for her, his calm presence created a bubble of unexpected privacy despite the lingering stares. Franco, Paulus said quietly, and the sommelier appeared as if summoned by thought alone. The older man's eyes widened almost imperceptibly when he saw Paulus, and he gave a small, reverent bow that seemed oddly formal for an upscale restaurant. Mr. Caldus. It's been some time. Indeed. Bring us the 1947 Chateau Blanc, please. And the chef's tasting menu for the lady. Paulus glanced at Ashley. Unless you have allergies I should know about? She shook her head mutely. The sommelier departed with another slight bow, moving with unusual urgency. The 1947. Ashley managed, her voice still shaky. That must cost. An evening's entertainment is priceless when spent in worthwhile company, Paulus interrupted gently. And I suspect you could use something remarkable after what you just endured. When the wine arrived, Franco handled the bottle with the reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. He poured with trembling hands, and Ashley noticed Paulus give him an almost imperceptible nod of dismissal. The first sip was velvet and smoke, complex beyond anything she'd ever tasted. I don't understand why you did that, she whispered. You don't even know me. I know enough. Paulus studied her with those pale, unsettling eyes. I know you arrived tonight with hope. I know you chose that dress carefully, that you wanted to feel beautiful. And I know that man was unworthy of a single moment of your time. He paused. Tell me, Ashley, it is Ashley, yes? I heard him say your name. Do you always accept such treatment? The question, asked so gently, broke something loose inside her. Over courses of seared duck and truffle risotto that she barely tasted, Ashley found herself confessing. The endless string of dating app disasters. The men who praised her face but suggested she get healthy. The ex-boyfriend who'd kept their relationship secret for 8 months. The crushing certainty that she was fundamentally unlovable in her current body. Paulus listened with an intensity that felt almost supernatural. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes. He simply heard her. I've seen much cruelty in my time, he said finally, swirling his wine. I'm rather old-fashioned, I'm afraid. I come from an era when honor meant something, when a person's worth wasn't measured by such shallow metrics. His voice carried weight, as if old-fashioned was a profound understatement. The world has grown simultaneously more enlightened and more savage. It's disappointing. How old-fashioned are we talking? Ashley asked, attempting lightness. A ghost of a smile crossed his pale lips. Let's simply say I remember when courtship was an art form, not a swipe-right transaction. Their eyes met, and Ashley felt something shift, a recognition she couldn't name. When Paulus reached across the table and gently covered her hand with his skin was cool but not cold, and she felt inexplicably, impossibly safe. You are not what he said you were, Paulus murmured. You are so much more. The night air was crisp when they finally stepped into the parking lot, 3 hours having passed like minutes. Ashley fumbled for her phone, still floating on the unexpected magic of the evening, as Paulus recited his number in that accent she couldn't quite place. Please, he said softly, let me know you've arrived home safely. The city can be unkind to those traveling alone at night. She nodded, typing his contact information with trembling fingers, then looked up to say good night and froze. His car was a masterpiece of automotive history, A vintage black Rolls-Royce that looked like it had rolled out of a 1920s film set. The paint gleamed obsidian under the parking lot lights, chrome details catching the glow like captured moonlight. It was immaculately maintained, impossibly elegant, and far too museum quality to be anyone's daily driver. That's your car. Ashley breathed. Paulus smiled faintly. I prefer classics. Modern vehicles lack character. He opened the door with old-world grace. Until tomorrow, Ashley. She drove home in a daze, her small Honda Civic feeling even more humble than usual. Her phone sat in the cup holder, Paulus's number glowing on the screen like a talisman. He'd asked to see her again tomorrow. Tomorrow. A man who drove vintage Rolls-Royces and ordered 70-year-old wine wanted to have coffee with her. The hope carried her all the way to her apartment building, up 2 flights of stairs, through her front door, and shattered the moment she passed the bathroom mirror. The harsh fluorescent light showed everything the restaurant's romantic candlelight had hidden. The way her dress pulled across her stomach. The fullness of her arms. The double chin that appeared when she looked down. She stared at herself, and Logan's words came flooding back with renewed venom. An embarrassment to be seen with. What had she been thinking? Paulus was, whatever he was, impossibly pale, eerily graceful, served by restaurant staff like visiting royalty, driving a car worth more than her annual salary. The way the sommelier had bowed. The coldness of his skin. Those eyes that seemed to look through centuries. Vampire, her mind whispered. He's actually a vampire. And even if he wasn't, even if she'd imagined the supernatural edge to everything about him, the math remained the same. Men like Paulus Caldus didn't fall for women like Ashley Morrison. He'd been kind, chivalrous, probably felt sorry for her after witnessing her humiliation. Her phone buzzed the next morning. Good morning. There's a cafe near the Botanical Gardens that serves exceptional coffee. Would 11 suit you? Ashley stared at the message until her eyes blurred. Then she set the phone face down on her nightstand. By the end of week 1, she had 17 unread messages. By week 2, he'd called 3 times, each voicemail more concerned than the last. By week 3, the messages had stopped, and Ashley had convinced herself it was for the best. She spent those weeks scrolling through her phone at 2 a.m., rereading his texts, hating herself for wanting something she could never deserve. Meredith didn't bother with pleasantries when she slid into the coffee shop booth 3 weeks and 2 days after the incident at Marcello's. She set down her latte with enough force to slosh foam over the rim and fixed Ashley with a glare that could strip paint. Okay. Explain. Ashley looked up from her untouched cappuccino. Explain what? Don't play dumb with me. You've been dodging my calls, posting cryptic sad girl quotes on Instagram at 3 in the morning, and according to Marcus, who ran into you at the grocery store looking like a zombie, you've been living on wine and regret. Meredith leaned forward. So I'll ask again, why are you ghosting the gorgeous man who actually stood up for you? I'm not, Ashley started. You absolutely are. I saw the screenshots you sent me that night. Please let me know you're safe. I enjoyed our evening immensely. I hope I didn't overstep. Meredith ticked them off on her fingers. That man texted you for 3 weeks straight, Ash. 3 weeks. And you couldn't send back a single reply. Ashley's throat tightened. You don't understand. Then help me understand. Because from where I'm sitting, a kind, clearly wealthy, absurdly handsome man defended you from that asshole Logan, bought you expensive wine, and asked you on a date. And you, what? Decided you didn't deserve nice things. He's not human, Mare. The words tumbled out before Ashley could stop them. Meredith blinked. What? Paulus. He's not. I think he might be a vampire. Ashley said it quietly, aware of how insane it sounded. The pale skin, and I mean pale like he's never seen the sun. The way he moved like gravity worked differently for him. That car, Mare. It was from the 1920s but looked brand new. And the sommelier, this older man who probably makes 6 figures, he bowed. Actually bowed like Paulus was royalty. She took a shaky breath. His skin was cold when he touched my hand. And the way he talked about being old-fashioned and seeing much cruelty in his time. It wasn't nostalgia, Mare. It was memory. Like he was actually there. Meredith sat back, processing. Then she shrugged. Okay. So he's a vampire. Okay. That's all you have to say. Ashley, you've been miserable for 3 weeks because you think you're not good enough for him. Now you're telling me he's literally an immortal creature of the night. Meredith's expression softened into something between pity and frustration. Sweetie, do you hear yourself? You're not running because he might be a vampire. You're running because he liked you. And you can't accept that someone extraordinary would want someone you've convinced yourself is ordinary. The truth of it hit like a physical blow. Ashley felt tears prickling at her eyes. So what if he's a vampire? Meredith continued, gentler now. He liked you. He defended you. He wanted to see you again. And you ran because you're too scared to believe you might actually deserve something good. Ashley stared at her coffee, watching her reflection waver in the dark surface. What if I'm right, though? What if he was just being kind and I text him back and he? What if he wasn't? Meredith interrupted. What if you just threw away something real because you're too afraid to find out? That night, Ashley lay in bed staring at her phone, Meredith's words echoing in her mind. At 11:47 p.m., the screen illuminated with one final message. I understand fear. I have lived with it for centuries. Fear of connection, of loss, of allowing anyone close enough to matter. If you wish only friendship, I would be honored. But please don't vanish because you believe you are unworthy. You are not. Whatever you decide, I hope you know that meeting you was a gift I hadn't expected. Be well, Ashley. Her finger hovered over the keyboard for 20 minutes before she finally typed. I'm sorry. Coffee tomorrow. The response came in seconds. I would like that very much. The cafe Paulus suggested was a tiny place tucked between a bookstore and a florist, the kind of establishment that served pour-over coffee in handmade ceramic mugs. Ashley arrived 15 minutes early, her stomach a knot of anxiety, and claimed a table by the window where sunlight streamed through in golden columns. When Paulus walked in at exactly 11 o'clock, the morning light hit him full in the face, and he didn't flinch. No burning. No recoiling. He simply stood in the sunbeam for a moment, located her with those pale eyes, and smiled with what looked like relief. So much for that myth, Ashley thought, feeling oddly disappointed. Though as he approached, moving through the crowded cafe without bumping a single chair despite the tight quarters, she realized the supernatural grace remained. Vampire or not, Paulus Caldus was not entirely ordinary. Thank you for meeting me, he said, settling across from her. I wasn't certain you would. I wasn't certain I would either, Ashley admitted. I owe you an apology for disappearing like that. It was cruel. It was self-preservation. Paulus signaled the barista with a subtle gesture. I'm familiar with the instinct. He paused, studying her face. You've been afraid. Of me, perhaps. Or of what being near me might mean. Ashley wrapped her hands around her untouched water glass. Are you? What are you exactly? Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. Direct. I appreciate that. He waited as the barista delivered 2 espressos, then continued in a voice too low to carry beyond their table. I am what you suspect, though the stories have gotten much wrong over the centuries. Sunlight doesn't harm me, though I prefer the evening. Religious symbols hold no power. And I'm not compelled to count grains of rice or ask permission to enter homes. He smiled faintly at her expression. I was born in 1234, in what is now Romania. I've been this since 1256, when a creature older than memory decided I was worthy of the gift. Or the curse, depending on one's perspective. Ashley's breath caught. 800 years. Nearly. Paulus took a sip of espresso, and the gesture was so normal, so human, that it created a strange cognitive dissonance. I have watched empires rise and crumble. I've forgotten more languages than most people will ever learn. I've loved and lost more times than I care to count, because that is the nature of immortality. Everyone you care for becomes a countdown to inevitable grief. His voice carried a weight that made Ashley's chest ache. For the last several decades I've simply stopped connecting, stopped trying. I raise my daughter, I manage my affairs, and I exist. It seemed easier than the alternative. What changed? Ashley whispered. Paulus met her eyes, and something in his gaze was achingly vulnerable. I sat in a restaurant and watched a remarkable woman endure cruelty with dignity. And when you spoke to me, I felt seen for the first time in longer than I can articulate. Not as the vampire king of the north, not as a creature to be feared or used, but as simply Paulus. He reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. I haven't felt truly seen by anyone in decades, Ashley. Not until you. The confession hung between them, fragile and precious as spun glass. I don't know what I'm doing, Ashley admitted, her voice cracking. I don't know how to be around someone like you. I don't even know how to be around regular people who like me. Then we learned together. Paulus's smile was gentle. Slowly. At whatever pace feels safe. I have time more than you can imagine. And I would rather have your friendship, earned honestly over years, than rush something that frightens you. Ashley felt something a knot in her chest. Coffee, she said. Weekly coffee. Can we start there? I would be honored. They talked until the lunch crowd filtered in, about small things and large ones, about her graphic design work and his memories of artists long dead. When they finally parted on the sidewalk, Paulus's goodbye held the promise of next week, and the week after, and all the weeks to come. The estate loomed at the end of a tree-lined drive that seemed to exist outside of time, all wrought iron gates and manicured hedges that belonged in a different century. Ashley's hands tightened on the steering wheel as the Gothic manor came into view. 3 stories of dark stone and arched windows, ivy climbing the walls like it had been there since the foundation was laid. Which, knowing Paulus, it probably had. She'd changed outfits 4 times before settling on a deep emerald wrap dress that Meredith had insisted made her look sophisticated but approachable. Now, parking her Honda beside Paulus's vintage Rolls-Royce, Ashley felt ridiculous. What was she doing here? Meeting his daughter. His teenage vampire daughter who'd probably take one look at her and wonder what her immortal father was thinking. Paulus met her at the door before she could knock, as if he'd been listening for the sound of her car. You came, he said, and the relief in his voice steadied her nerves slightly. You invited me, Ashley managed. I'm terrified, but I came. Eleanor is terrified too, if that helps. She's changed clothes 3 times. His smile was warm as he guided her inside, past a grand foyer with marble floors and a chandelier that probably cost more than Ashley's entire apartment building. The girl who appeared at the top of the sweeping staircase was not what Ashley expected. Eleanor Caldas was perhaps 16 in appearance, with her father's platinum blonde haircut in a modern asymmetrical bob and bright, intelligent eyes. She wore ripped jeans and a vintage band t-shirt, and when she bounded down the stairs with supernatural speed, her grin was disarmingly human. Oh, I love that dress, Eleanor said immediately, circling Ashley with unabashed curiosity. The color is perfect on you. And you did the wrap style. So much more interesting than those boring bodycon things everyone wears. She looked at her father. Dad, she has actual fashion sense. Can we keep her? Eleanor, Paulus said, but there was laughter in his voice. Ashley felt herself relax despite everything. Thank you. I wasn't sure what one wears to dinner with vampires. Definitely not a turtleneck, Eleanor said seriously. Sends the wrong message. Then she burst into laughter at Ashley's expression. I'm kidding. Oh my God, your face. We don't actually, Dad does technically, but he gets his from a medical supply company. Very ethical. Very boring. Dinner was served in a dining room that looked like it belonged in a castle, but Eleanor's running commentary made it feel oddly cozy. She asked Ashley about graphic design, showed her sketches she'd been working on, fashion illustrations that were remarkably talented, and told stories about her father's historical fashion disasters with wicked glee. He wore a powdered wig in the 1700s, Eleanor confided over the main course. There are paintings. I have them hidden for blackmail purposes. There are no paintings, Paulus interjected, but his eyes were soft as they rested on his daughter. As dessert arrived, an elaborate chocolate creation that Eleanor attacked with enthusiasm, the teenager grew quiet for a moment, studying Ashley with an expression beyond her apparent years. "You're the lady who was sad at the restaurant, aren't you?" Eleanor said suddenly. "Dad told me about you. About what that asshole said." She glanced at Paulus. "I can say asshole, he was definitely an asshole." "Eleanor," Paulus began. "No, let me finish." Eleanor turned back to Ashley, her expression earnest. "Dad told me about how brave you were. How you still had dinner with him even though you'd just been through something awful. And how you made him laugh talking about terrible client requests and design trends." She reached across the table, her cool hand covering Ashley's warm one. "He hasn't smiled like this in a very long time. Like decades long. I think you're good for him." Ashley felt tears prick her eyes. "I think he's good for me too," she whispered. Eleanor squeezed her hand, then sat back with a satisfied smile. "Good. Then you'll come back next week, right? I want to show you my entire portfolio. And Dad's embarrassing historical portraits." "There are no portraits," Paulus repeated, but he was smiling, and when his eyes met Ashley's across the candlelit table, she saw something that looked remarkably like hope. The day started badly and deteriorated from there with the systematic precision of a carefully orchestrated disaster. Ashley's car died on the highway during morning rush hour, belching smoke and grinding to a halt in a cacophony of honking horns and shouted obscenities. The tow truck took 90 minutes to arrive, making her 2 hours late to work, which meant she missed the meeting where David Chen, who'd been with the company 6 months less than her, was announced as the new creative director. The position she'd been promised. The promotion her boss had assured her was practically in the bag. "We just felt David's aesthetic was more aligned with where we want to take the brand," her supervisor explained during their afternoon one-on-one, not quite meeting Ashley's eyes. "You understand." She understood perfectly. David was tall, conventionally attractive, and looked good in the sleek business casual the agency preferred. Ashley was talented, but she didn't fit the image they wanted representing the company. By the time she left the office at 6, after a trip to the pharmacy to pay for her car's tow and diagnostic fee on a credit card that was already stretched thin, Ashley was holding herself together with sheer stubbornness and spite. She made it all the way to the parking garage before running into Melissa from accounting. "Oh, Ashley. I didn't recognize you at first." Melissa's smile was bright and venomous. "Have you been stress eating? I know the promotion thing must be disappointing, but maybe this is a sign to focus on self-care? I have a great keto coach if you want her number." Ashley stood frozen as Melissa walked away, her heels clicking cheerfully on the concrete. Then she sat down on the curb next to her Uber and cried until her driver awkwardly offered her tissues. At home she texted Paulus. "So sorry, not feeling well. Need to cancel tonight. Rain check." His response was immediate. "Of course. Feel better." She should have known that wouldn't be the end of it. The knock came at 7:30, just as Ashley had settled into her couch in ratty pajama pants and an oversized college sweatshirt. Her third glass of wine in hand and her hair in an unbrushed knot on top of her head. She considered not answering, but then Paulus's voice came through the door, gentle and concerned. "Ashley, have soup. And an umbrella, though I suspect you're already inside." She looked down at herself, makeup smeared, eyes swollen, wearing clothes she wouldn't answer the door for the delivery driver in, and almost told him to leave. But the fight had gone out of her somewhere between the highway and Melissa's casual cruelty. When she opened the door, Paulus took in her appearance without a flicker of judgment. He was holding a container from the French bistro they'd visited last week, rain darkening the shoulders of his coat, umbrella dripping onto her doormat. "You didn't have to come," Ashley said, her voice thick with tears. I wanted to. He stepped inside carefully, setting the soup on her small kitchen counter. Eleanor sends her love. She suggested ice cream, but I thought soup was more practical. Ashley tried to laugh, but it came out as a sob. I'm a mess, Paulus. I can't. You shouldn't see me like this. Like what? Human. He moved to her couch, settling onto the worn cushions with the same grace he brought to his manor's antique furniture. Then he simply opened his arms. You broke. Ashley collapsed against him, and Paulus held her while she cried. About the car, the promotion, Melissa's comment, about feeling like no matter how hard she tried she would never be enough in a world that had already decided she was too much. He didn't offer platitudes or try to fix anything. He just held her, one cool hand stroking her unbrushed hair, letting her fall apart in the safety of his presence. When the sobs finally subsided into hiccups, Paulus spoke quietly. You don't have to be perfect for me, Ashley. I've seen empires rise and fall. I've watched civilizations build monuments to ideals of beauty that crumbled into dust within a century. Perfection is an illusion, a lie sold by people who profit from your insecurity. He tilted her chin up gently so she had to meet his eyes. But you, messy, wounded, real, you are extraordinary. You survive in a cruel world with your kindness intact. You create beauty for a living despite working for people who don't deserve you. And you're sitting here in pajamas with wine breath and mascara on your cheeks. And I have never found you more remarkable. Ashley stared at him, this impossible man who'd seen centuries pass, and whispered, How can you mean that? Because I've had 800 years to learn what matters, Paulus said simply. And what matters is this, right here, right now. You trusting me enough to let me see you at your lowest. That's worth more than 1,000 perfect evenings. He stayed until midnight, heating the soup, listening to the whole terrible story, and making her laugh despite everything with dry observations about the futility of corporate hierarchies. When he finally left, pressing a kiss to her forehead at the door, Ashley realized something had shifted. He'd seen her at her worst, and he'd stayed. The manor felt different that evening, quieter somehow, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Eleanor had left that morning for Edinburgh to visit her mother's family, a clan of Scottish vampires who still maintained estates in the Highlands. Ashley arrived at 7 to find Paulus waiting on the front steps, backlit by the warm glow spilling from the doorway. She made me promise to take photos, he said, holding up his phone with a rueful smile. Apparently I'm criminally bad at documenting important moments. Ashley laughed, but there was something in his expression, a nervous energy she'd never seen before, that made her pulse quicken. They'd shared dozens of dinners over the past months, but tonight felt charged with an anticipation she couldn't name. Dinner was simple. Pasta and wine in the smaller dining room, the one with walls lined in burgundy silk and paintings that Paulus had collected across centuries. They talked about Ashley's latest freelance project, about Eleanor's excitement over her trip, about nothing and everything. But when the plates were cleared and the wine bottle emptied, Paulus stood with that supernatural grace and extended his hand. Come with me. There's something I want to show you. His private study was a room Ashley had glimpsed only in passing, a sanctum at the end of the east wing that Eleanor had mentioned was off-limits even to her. When Paulus opened the heavy oak door, Ashley's breath caught. The walls were books. Floor to ceiling, every available surface. Books in languages she couldn't identify with spines cracked from centuries of reading. A massive desk dominated one corner, its surface covered in what looked like hand-drawn maps. But what drew her eye was the painting above the fireplace, a portrait of a young man in medieval armor. His pale eyes unmistakable even across 800 years. That's you, Ashley whispered. 1255. Commissioned by my father before he died. Paulus moved to stand beside her, studying his own face with the detachment of examining a stranger. I was 21. Certain I would inherit his lands, marry well, father sons, and die in my bed surrounded by grandchildren. His voice carried the weight of profound loss. I had no idea that within a year, everything I understood about existence would be obliterated. He turned to face her, and Ashley saw vulnerability in his expression that made her chest ache. I've lived in this manor for 200 years. I've raised Eleanor alone for most of her life. I've managed territories and attended councils and fulfilled every duty expected of my position. And I've been profoundly, crushingly lonely the entire time. Ashley's throat tightened. Paulus, please let me finish. He took her hands, his cool fingers wrapping around her warm ones. That night at Marcello's, when I heard that man's cruelty, I intervened because I couldn't abide injustice. But when you sat across from me, when you spoke with such raw honesty about your pain, something in me recognized something in you. Like calling to across impossible distance. He drew a shaky breath, unnecessary for someone who didn't need to breathe, which made it all the more meaningful. I have fallen in love with you, Ashley. Not because I'm trying to fill some void, not because I pity you or want to save you. I love you because your humanity, your capacity to feel so deeply despite being hurt repeatedly, has rekindled something in me I thought had died centuries ago. Tears spilled down Ashley's cheeks. How can I be enough for you? I'm ordinary, Paulus. I'm mortal. I'll grow old and you'll stay exactly as you are, and eventually you'll. Then let me give you eternity. The words were fierce, urgent, his hands tightening on hers. Not now. Only when you're ready, if you're ever ready. But Ashley, I am the vampire king of the Northern Territories. I am immortal and powerful, and I have existed for 800 years. And in all that time, I have never felt what I feel when I look at you. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I have waited 2 centuries to feel this. I am not letting you go. Ashley stared at him, this impossible ancient creature who'd seen empires rise and fall, who could offer her forever, and felt something shift irrevocably in her chest. All her fears, all her insecurities about being too much or not enough, seemed suddenly insignificant against the raw truth in his eyes. I love you too, she whispered. I'm terrified, but I love you. Paulus pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. We'll be terrified together. When he kissed her, it was gentle at first, reverent, as if she were something precious he was afraid to break. But then Ashley rose on her toes, her hands fisting in his shirt, and the kiss deepened into something that tasted like promise and eternity and coming home after a lifetime of wandering. When they finally broke apart, both breathless despite only one of them needing air, Paulus smiled, truly smiled, and Ashley saw the weight of centuries lift from his shoulders. Forever, he murmured against her lips. Forever, she agreed. Marcello's looked different, empty. Ashley stood in the doorway, taking in the restaurant that had been the site of her worst humiliation and her most unexpected salvation. Every table was bare except one, the corner table where Paulus had sat that night 6 months ago, now adorned with candles that cast dancing shadows across white linen. You rented out the entire restaurant, Ashley said, though it wasn't really a question. She'd learned that Paulus had a flair for the dramatic when it mattered. I wanted privacy. He emerged from the shadows near their old table, devastating in a black suit that looked like it had been tailored sometime in the 19th century and preserved perfectly ever since. And I wanted to bring us back to where it began. Franco appeared with the same Bordeaux from that first night, hands steadier now than they'd been then, though his reverence for Paulus hadn't diminished. He poured 2 glasses, bowed slightly, and disappeared into the kitchen with the discretion of someone who'd served vampire royalty before. They sat at the table where Ashley had once trembled with humiliation, and the symmetry was almost painful. But when Paulus reached across the tablecloth and took her hand, his touch was warm now, or perhaps she'd simply stopped noticing the cold. 6 months ago I sat here alone, Paulus said quietly, convinced I would spend the next century the same way I'd spent the last 2, isolated, going through motions, existing but not living. His pale eyes held hers. And then you walked in wearing that blue dress, and everything changed. Ashley's breath caught as he slid from his chair and knelt beside the table, producing a small velvet box that looked as old as he was. When he opened it, the ring inside took her breath away, A sapphire the color of midnight, surrounded by diamonds that caught the candlelight like captured stars. "This belonged to my mother," Paulus said. "It survived 800 years waiting for the right hand to wear it. Ashley Morrison, will you marry me? Will you let me love you for as long as you'll have me? Whether that's 50 years or 5,000. Through tears, Ashley whispered. "Yes." The wedding took place on an October evening when twilight painted the manor's gardens in shades of amber and gold. Eleanor had overseen every detail with the enthusiasm of someone who'd waited decades to plan a party, transforming the grounds into something from a Gothic fairy tale. Lanterns hung from ancient trees, and flowers that bloomed only at night released their perfume into the cooling air. Ashley wore ivory lace that Eleanor had helped her choose, modern in cut but vintage in spirit. Eleanor herself was resplendent in a gown of emerald silk from 1780. Her platinum hair swept up in an elaborate style that would have looked ridiculous on anyone else but suited her perfectly. The ceremony was officiated by Father Benedict, a vampire so ancient his accent belonged to a Rome that existed before the fall, who spoke the vows in Latin before translating them into English. Paulus's hand never left Ashley's, and when he lifted her veil to kiss her as the sun finally slipped below the horizon, she heard Eleanor's delighted laugh ring out above the scattered applause of the few vampire guests in attendance. "Finally," Eleanor stage whispered. "I thought he'd never actually do it." The reception lasted until dawn, and Ashley danced with her vampire husband under stars that had watched him live and die and live again, thinking that somehow, impossibly, she'd found her forever in the last place she'd expected to find anything at all. 5 years later, Ashley stood in the manor's grand hall and felt the weight of immortality settle into her bones like coming home. The transformation had been her choice, made on a quiet morning 3 months ago when she'd woken up beside Paulus and realized she wanted infinite mornings just like it. Her reflection in the hall's massive mirror showed the changes. Skin paler, eyes brighter, everything sharpened and clarified in ways that made her old life feel like a dream. But when Eleanor burst through the front door, dragging a nervous-looking young man behind her, Ashley's laugh was entirely human. "Mom, Dad, this is Marcus. Marcus, these are my parents, and if you survive dinner without fainting, we'll call it a win." Ashley caught Paulus's eye across the hall and saw him smiling, not the careful, controlled expression he'd worn for centuries, but something open and unguarded and completely genuine. He crossed to her side, slipping an arm around her waist, and she leaned into him with the easy comfort of eternity ahead of them. Eleanor launched into an animated story about how she and Marcus had met, her voice filling the cavernous space with warmth and life, and Ashley thought about that night at Marcello's when she believed she was fundamentally unlovable. She thought about Logan's cruelty, about her own crushing doubt, about all the ways she'd convinced herself she wasn't enough. And then she looked at her family. Chosen, impossible, perfect, and understood what Paulus had been trying to tell her all along. Love wasn't about being perfect. It wasn't about meeting someone's impossible standards or fitting into a shape the world demanded. It was about finding someone who saw your soul in all its messy complexity and chose it anyway. Paulus pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple, and in his mind she heard the thought he projected to her alone, a gift of their bond. "In 800 years, I have never been as happy as I am in this moment." Ashley looked up at him, at Eleanor chattering excitedly, at the life they'd built together from pain and possibility, and sent back a thought of her own. Then let's have 800 more. Outside, the sun was setting again, painting the world in shades of gold. But inside the manor, surrounded by the family she'd found in the wreckage of her worst night, Ashley Morrison Caldas stood in the light and knew, with absolute certainty, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Forever was just beginning.